Okay.
Okay. Hey, good evening, everyone. May I request you to post into text chat a quick intro about yourself. Feel free to share your thoughts. And today's topic that we're talking about is coaching and its future, as you know, envisage it. And it's time to get started. So we've already started the recording. A few ground rules to call out as we get started. Please be informed that the session is being recorded and participants can choose not to participate through the use of a microphone and or camera, though we would like all of you to have your cameras on and participate wholeheartedly to make the session as engaging as possible. I will also request you to keep your audios muted to minimize disruption. We have an esteemed guest in Ram Ramanathan with us today. And as we go by the session, I request you to please post your questions in the text chat or raise your hands in case you have any questions. We hope to cover all the questions as we make progress. With that, I'm totally excited about the session and get straight into it. Please put your hands together as I invite Ram Ramanathan to take us through this session titled Past, Present, and Future as relevant to coaching in India. And let me take a few minutes to talk about Ram. Ram is a systemic, sustainable, and spiritual self-development coach. He's author of Coaching the Spirit and Recreating Your Future books and programs. He's founder of Cocharia, builder of multi-billion-dollar businesses, has 45 years of experience in corporate leadership. He's a serial entrepreneur, angel investor, and a VC. He's also a government advisor and C-suite coach and leadership trainer with global reputation. Is credentialed with all major global coaching federations and is an accredited trainer at all major coaching federations. He's a keynote speaker on leadership, coaching, and spirituality. He's a creator of Mindlessness Process, creating awareness about mindfulness. So let us put our hands together to welcome Ram. And we, when I was discussing with Ram, we thought we'll keep this in the fireside chat mode. So what I will do is let me put a question to Ram. So Ram, just to get started, let us talk about your journey with coaching, your early days, and what prompted you to bring in Eastern philosophy to coaching.
Yeah, one of the things that came to me as you were talking about my past experiences, what I did. As far as individual is concerned, I think the past is pretty irrelevant to anybody. Okay, so however, when it comes to a mindset or a practice like coaching, yeah, the past is relevant. What I mean by that is, yeah, I know it's all good intent that you asked me what I did. Yeah, I was trained as an engineer. I worked in professions. I was a CEO for many companies, and I built multi-billion-dollar companies and all that stuff. But I don't think they mean really very much. If I had learned something from my mistakes, probably it did. There was a point in time I went into, let's say I was sitting on top of a pyramid, in a corporate pyramid of multi-billion-dollar conglomerate, which I had helped build, and that collapsed. And so that was a point in time when I went in for a Vipassana program, sort of helped to discover myself. Then I went on for about another 7 years. I went on to a spiritual path where I already was fairly interested in meditation and all that stuff. And that ended those people who probably had been in training with me, like Anand, Nikhil, and all these people here, they would know that it didn't end too well. However, one thing that I learned was that it's best to depend on oneself, be one's own guru, Atma Guru, as it is called. And in coaching, the same thing applies to my mind as self-coach. And realize what's best fitted for you within your own DNA rather than depending on someone else to tell you what is to be done. So in that process, I chanced upon coaching. And many of you may have heard of him, may know him, R.R. Nair, who's my dear friend, colleague, and also mentor. In a passing conversation, when I sort of helped to get out of a bit of a screw up that I was in, he said, "Why don't you take up coaching?" And you've had such a lot of experience, cross-cultural experiences. You're a troubleshooter. You've always been that. So all the wrong reasons for me to become a coach. But anyway, it sort of appealed to me. And I said, okay. And I told my wife this is, and she knew RR pretty well, know the family extremely well. And she said, yeah, if RR says that's good, but what else you have done so many super things in your life, and what is it that you want to do now? So what does coaching mean? And for a change, I started listening to my wife at that point in time in my career. There wasn't very much down that I could go, actually. So I looked up and I said, yeah, you know what? I looked up to ICF and all these kind of things, various things, talk to people. And it says that I have to be a good listener to be a coach. He said, you don't even listen to me. How the hell are you going to listen to people? What kind of a coach are you going to be? So I think probably the desire to prove her wrong to some way. And the challenge was what I went into coaching. And it was very true. Because when I went into a class of people, I was already at that time about over 60, and most of them were 30 and below, and they couldn't get a damn about who I was. Like, for instance, in this group as well, I mean, who the hell cares what my background is? Does it make sense in terms of answering questions people have? Do it make any sense to any of you? That's what matters, and that's what happened. So anyhow, whatever it was, and my son and I founded Kocharia way back in 2012, 13, soon after I got my credentials. And very often a question that is asked, how do I build my coaching business? And I don't know, damn, except that at that time I knew that I had worked for several years outside India. I had just come back to India, despite the fact I was probably a corporate leader for many years. Nobody cared a damn thing. And so, but some of my friends suggested, why don't I contact, I think some of you may know of him, Akhil Basrai, who was then the president of the, I think, NHRD and AME and all that stuff. He said, Ram, why don't you get in touch with NHRD in Bangalore? And it so happened that that was, for me, phenomenal turning point. Harish Devarajan at that time was the president of the Bangalore chapter, and he was ex-Levers, I was ex-Levers. So we got along like house on fire, and Harish was putting up a conference that year in 2011, if I remember right. So I got in as a part of that. At the end of it, a bunch of guys said, hey, if you say that you are a coach and something in your way that you are working with us makes a strong impression. So if you're going to teach us, not someone else, they are willing to join. So that is how I started my coaching practice. That's how Kocharia was born. So that's where we are today. And yeah, we will go into some of the details. And what was the second part of your question? Something to do with Eastern philosophy, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, I was actually talking about, you bring in a lot of Eastern philosophy, particularly Kocharia specializes in that. So what exactly is the fusion you're bringing in?
Okay, let's try and simplify coaching, okay? You have all kinds of fancy definitions, ICF definitions and others, etc. The simplest way is, if you really look at anyone coming to you as a practicing coach, no one is coming here to you as a coach and pay good money to you to share their joy with you. They come to you because they have some issues, some problems. They are disempowered in some way. And so they are really looking for something that would help them to move out of the disempowerment to a state of empowerment. And coaching, as you all know, you're all experts in that field, is different from mentoring and everything else in terms of using the awareness of the individual to be able to find their own solutions out of their own DNA. Now, that's all fine. It's great. But the question is, how empowered is a coach? And I would like each one of you to put your hand on your heart and say, in a coaching situation, how empowered am I to be able to help dispel the disempowerment from a client? And at least people whom I have trained, and we have trained pretty much the majority of credential holders in India at this point in time, certainly over about 60%. And 80% of those, when I interact with them in some way in supervision and stuff like that, they themselves have huge baggages in them. They haven't cleared those baggages. But of course, as a coach, you have to point it out very appreciatively, very delicately, with a great amount of empathy, unconditional positive regard, and all that. That's all very true. So the more I started working on that space, the more I discovered that there's a lot deeper than the mere set of competencies which are given to you as a skill set. It's not about the skill set at all. It's about the mindset. And unless you have the mindset, whether it's a Rogerian in the sense of client centricity, of unconditional positive regard, empathy, and congruence, which he derived from Maslow's principles of the humanistic philosophy of the 5 levels reaching in self-actualization, which in turn, to some extent, was based on Jung's collective unconsciousness principles. And I went deeper into all these, and I found, I don't know how many of you are familiar. If you're not, it's worth reading this book. It's based on a set of lectures that he gave, Kundalini, the Psychology of Yoga. So Jung wrote a book on the chakras, and he talks about it. It's a very erudite book. And a lot of his, for those of you who are familiar with Jung, the collective unconsciousness, which is about the archetypes, the persona, the self, the shadow, animus anima, and stuff like that, metaphors, and so on and so forth, a lot of which is used pretty glibly in coaching without really understanding much of it, arose not from merely a point of collective unconsciousness in the sense of Freud, with whom he differed, which was all about the negatives, that your collective, of course, Freud never talked about the collective, he talked only about the individual unconscious, which was all about the dregs, mostly arising out of sex and shame and guilt and all that stuff. But Jung's view was very different. And that viewpoint came mainly from the Upanishad and the Vedic scriptures. And that is how my initial interest in delving deep into this happened, though, in fact, during my spiritual training, I had a lot of experience in going through the scriptures. I wrote 30 over books on various scriptures, including the Gita and so on. But in coaching, when I started looking deeper, a large part of it, and especially one of my real connect points as far as coaching is concerned, is about the concepts of awareness and consciousness, which are defined in the Mandukya Upanishad as an expansion of how, what the meaning of the Pranava mantra Om is. It's about the 4 states. The so-called awake state, which is like the mindfulness, and mindfulness, contrary to what we all believe, was never advocated by Buddha. Thich Nhat Hanh, for some reason, picked it up and he said it's Buddhist. It is not Buddhist. Zen Buddhism talks about, called Mushen, which is no mind. Buddha talked about Sunya, which has got nothing with mindfulness. It's a wrong interpretation of a particular word called Satipatta in the Eightfold Path, which actually means the right way of looking at the wrong memory, because memory was a bad word, both in Hinduism and about the conditioned memory. Anyway, cut a long story short, the 4 states are, you start with something like mindfulness, which is very necessary. If you're on a focused job, you've got to be sensitively aware of what you're doing, whether you're eating, whether you're working on a computer, on a machinery, whether you're driving or whatever you're doing. And there are 2 other states, of the dream states of subconsciousness, the deep sleep states of the unconsciousness. And finally, you come to what I used to call the mindlessness. Today we call as mind freeness. I see Arun here somewhere. He's fairly deep into that. So the mind freeness part of it, the 4th state of Turiya, is what I believe is to be, or needs to be, the conscious state. Nothing fancy. It is just about being non-judgmental. It's just about being objective, just about being witness. You don't have to become a Ramana Maharishi or Ramadeva Paramahamsa or whatever. You just have to learn, even as a client is speaking, not to get absorbed in either chat with the client or even forming certain judgments based on who you are and how you've been brought up in terms of evaluating that client. So for most people, in fact, I was quite surprised the other day when I was working with somebody on a supervisory conference, con call, and I was trying to tell them that, like, look, you should be careful about the internal dialogue. The person said, oh yeah, I know. I'm very, very conscious of it. I'm constantly looking at my internal dialogue. I said, what I mean is that you've got to stop that internal dialogue. So you're consciously looking at your internal dialogue only makes you more and more judgmental, because you're waiting for the client to finish. You don't even want to give a pause. You want to already offer a solution. You want to ask a question. 80% of assessments that I do as a assessor for ICF, the conversations are like that. Don't give a break. Come on, what the heck is the client talking about? What is the client blabbering about? Let me put in my wisdom out here. So if you can just stop and be quiet and pause and let your state be one of a witness state, which is what the mind-free state is, then you come into a completely different way of how you can handle coaching. And that then becomes mastery. So the simple difference between anything else and mastery, at PCC level, most people, even if they understand their competencies well, they coach the markers. And there are a bunch of powerful questions, all that kind of stuff. There's no such thing as powerful questions in coaching. There's only powerful listening. The question need to arise of the powerful questions. We discourage the concept of powerful questions in coach area. It has no meaning whatsoever. I'll come next to something else which we are working on now, which makes coaching, to my mind, much simpler. It also may make it difficult for some people who are very transactional, and which is where I think the future is. So I'll stop here. If there are any questions at this point in time, and whatever it made sense or not sense, please ask me.
If there are any questions, feel free to raise your hand, and I think we'll pick up the question. Else I'll just continue with. Okay, I don't see any raised hands. No, I don't. Okay, so let me just continue with the conversation. Then.
Sandeep has a question. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. Go ahead, Sandeep. Go ahead, Sandeep. Unmute yourself. Yeah.
Good evening, sir. I'm connecting from Mumbai.
Yeah. Don't call me sir, for heaven's sake. Just call me Ram. Okay.
Okay. That's coming out of the respect, because I'm interacting with you for the first time, speaking to you for the first time.
Thank you.
When we're talking in terms of the mindfulness, mindfulness, how does ascension of the awareness, or the consciousness level, helps us achieving that in a more sustained manner? Because when we are talking in terms of various clients, various environments, various cultures, and if as a coach I am able to achieve that for some and not for others, that also is a challenge.
Okay, let me see if I understood you correctly, okay? And please come back and tell me. First of all, I'm not denigrating the concept of mindfulness. It's extremely important. You have to be sensorily aware. You have to be aware of what you're doing. You have to be aware of the fact that you are breathing. You have to be aware of the fact that you are sitting right or walking right, or you are eating what you're eating. And it's very important that you are in that aware state. Instead of being a totally unaware state, you're gobbling food, talking to somebody, watching TV, all that kind of nonsense. Okay. So the mindful state has a tremendous amount of importance when you are engaged in some kind of, where I would say attention to details, etc., are required in whatever profession you are in your day job most of the time. But when you are in something which requires reflection, which requires a deep introspection, or creating that introspection in the other person, you are moving from the mind, body, and the senses state of mindfulness into something which is more subtle. You are moving into more an energy state. So it's experiential. people who can reach that state, they know the difference. Like when ICF says, in fact, I have tremendous regard for the quality with which the ICF competencies and the markers have been framed. When they talk about verbal and non-verbal expressions, energy, voice tone, etc. You cannot truly get into that state of observing, listening, and acknowledging those expressions from the client unless you move out of the mind-free state of the mindful state of being occupied with your own thinking. Because the mindful state is usually one of the prefrontal cortex being engaged. And when you are in the prefrontal cortex being engaged, your thinking occupies everything. So you got to freeze that. So a couple of techniques that you can use, we'll come to it later, is sensory techniques and how to create that silence within you. But coming back to your point, if you say, how do I use it for different people who are coming with different things? It's probably more relevant to different people coming with different things, because then you are coming from a state of neutrality. There's a word called tabula rasa. Tabula rasa means it's a blank slate. So your mind is a blank slate. There's nothing there. It's still. So you are just reflecting the other person like a dust-free mirror, almost. So there's no distortion in the reflection. Whereas the moment you have a judgment of anything at all, the moment you think, hey, this is an Indian, I have to face the guy this way. This is a Japanese, I have to face this guy that way. This guy is a Christian, this guy is a Hindu, this guy is a Muslim. Then immediately the mirror gets dusty. The mind is no longer still. That's what I mean when you have to be mind-free. Can you erase all that? Can you get into a state where you are centered, where the mind is not moving, mind is still? I'm not talking about being in the levels of a saint and that kind of stillness like Ramana Maharishi talked about. Most of us can do it with a little bit of experience. We teach that at Pujari. One of the first things that we start with is, in many, at least in my classes, some kind of meditation, simple breathing to center yourself, simple postural exercises, simply being aware of sensations in the body. Can you do those? That's what I meant. Does it answer your question, Sandeep?
Yeah, partly yes. In fact, maybe I was not able to frame it correctly and need to funnel it. But I'm saying what exactly you were saying in terms of reaching that neutrality or shunya sthiti, as we call it, as we raise our awareness. Are there any proven statistics as to at what stage you reach that neutrality in terms of research having been done at the consciousness level?
Look, the whole concept of consciousness is constantly at a debate. Okay. I mean, if you want to understand more about it, one of the people that I listen to from time to time is Huberman in Stanford, who does a lot of research on this, and he talks with psychologists and so on. So he talks a little bit about it. Vailo Ramchandran has written a number of books on consciousness. I met with him in San Diego. So there are stuff available, but neuroscience itself doesn't fully understand it. It's a very, very deep subject. We can tackle it at another thing where going deeper into neuroscience, which is one of my pet subjects. But much more importantly, why are you bothered about somebody else measuring you? Do you feel it? That's what is important. Quantum science tells you very clearly, and this has been proven, though nobody understands what the hell Einstein meant by theory of relativity. I've asked people to explain it to me, nobody can. But the fact is, yeah, everybody accepts that E equals mc square. At the end of it, matter is energy. And therefore, if your mind body is matter, the mind body is also energy. So can you then use that energy part of it? How the hell does it matter if neuroscience validates it or not? Why are we looking for somebody else's validation? For me, it's enough if I feel the energy. I'm sitting in front of someone and someone is telling me something, I not only feel the emotions and the impact of the thoughts, but there is something deeper intuitionally that comes up. And that is enough proof to be able to do that. So otherwise, it's like a dog digging into a garbage to pick out a bone. We can keep doing it forever and ever. Nothing will happen. You've got to experientially get into that state. It is not by any books, like this famous saying of Rumi or somebody, when he went to this master after having written many books, teach me something. The master said, go and throw all your goddamn books in the river and come back. And then you can learn something from me. So basically, that's what it is. People have experienced it, are never going to express it. The guys who express it from the top of the mountain or through the microphones and TVs, they know nothing because they haven't experienced it, which is why they are able to express it. If you really have experienced anything, even a glimpse of that truth, then it's very difficult. It's extremely difficult to explain what that state is, unless you are in that experiential state. So you can guide somebody into that state, but you cannot provide a description of that state or a validation of that state. Okay. But I'm quite happy at some point in time, if there are people who are deeper interested into this whole aspect of neurosciences linked to quantum, to the Upanishads, that's the area which I'm passionate about. Yeah. There were a couple of other people who had raised their hands. I don't know, somebody else's hand went down. Yeah, Girish, yours, and then, yeah. And after that, Kajal, yeah.
Girish, you're on mute if you're talking.
Yeah, I just took myself off mute. Hi, sir, this is Girish. I've just joined Coach Arya as one of your students. It's a great honor to be in this call with you. My question is around self-awareness, right? We are learning that as a core part of being of help to anyone else is the ability to know who you are, which itself is a very long journey. So before taking up any assignment or offering up ourselves as a coach, be it paid, non-paid, whatever it is, how long does this tapasya take of self-awareness? And if it is a long, ongoing discovery, would you advise get started and learn along the way, or get to a certain point of knowledge and only then start the journey as a coach?
Yeah. Girish, what I'll do is, let me just answer these set of questions and I'll take you deep into exactly what you're asking. Okay. It doesn't take very long. There are very, very simple ways of, look, I mean, to get to a state of someone like, I keep quoting Ramana Maharshi because he's a person who talked most about who am I. We are not talking at that level of states, but for most of us to be able to understand who we are and where we are coming from and what we are experiencing at a point in time is relatively simple. I'll get to that state. I'll get to that part of it in a few minutes' time. Yeah, Kajal?
Hello, sir. So I'm Kajal.
Yeah.
Can you hear me clearly?
Yeah, I can.
So I'm Kajal. I haven't done a single session of coaching. I'm a total novice and I'm, a potential student. So my question was that when you mentioned that if, like the Rumi example you gave, if the person is, he said through all your books. So I'm also just thinking if I join ICF coaching, then will that thing that is needed to be a coach, that experiential stuff that you were speaking about, will we get that in the ICF coaching? Because like you said, if we are not going to get that, then what's the point? And I think my question is actually very similar to Girish, that do we wait till we get there and then join the ICF coaching? Or how do we make sure, how do we ensure that we are getting there? Because, theoretically, most of the books, the Eastern philosophy talk about we being the soul and, divine oneness. And okay, even if I'm taking a session with a client and I say, okay, you're the soul, I'm the soul, I'm fully aware of this concept. But somewhere it is my mind that has entered through the back door, and I'm subscribing to a theory of the soul, and I'm trying to convince myself that I have understood it. I don't know if I'm making sense. Yeah.
No. Look, let's not get into soul, spirit, and all that stuff. Okay.
No. When I meant soul, I meant that pure state of consciousness or whatever. So
Okay.
I'm really not talking about soul. I'm talking about that state of awareness, consciousness that all of us are discussing here.
Look, I mean, awareness and consciousness are not two different things. Okay. Awareness is, I mean, in my lexicon, awareness is about what we think about ourselves in a particular situation, and consciousness is nothing. It's a lot more systemic. It's not just about ourselves, but it's about a larger system. I'll try and cover a little bit of that. It's very difficult for me to, in the 90 minutes that I have with you, to be able to go into all that. These are things which we, at least in the classes that I run in Kucharya, we go into much deeper depth to understand what it's. Now, coming back to ICF, look, let's not either deify ICF or demonize ICF. Okay. What ICF does is that if you want to follow a particular style of intervention, which may be called coaching, as different from mentoring, therapy, consulting, training, blah, blah, blah. And it's about eliciting the awareness within the client and not giving them solutions, which I think is absolutely correct. And it provides a set of prescriptive behavioral and skill set markers. And it also provides some amount of mindset. It's not the fault of ICF. I think they have done as much as they can. It's then the responsibility of the trainers to be able to take that and to help you practice it in a way that you anchor those qualities within you. The skill set has to become a mindset. Unless the mindset is there, the skill set will never happen. So for many people, and it was for me, when I first learned my coaching, this thing, and I got my PCC from an Australian, this thing. I mean, all these things about who questions and all that, and then I was mentored by a globally reputed person for my MCC, made no damn sense. Whatever they talked about was nonsense. If you're trying to explore the who of a person through a conversational means, which is about thinking through the prefrontal cortex, it is never going to happen. For the simple reason, the first responders in your system, mind-body system, are your sensory appetite, the visual at the back, the auditory on the side, your skin, etc., the gustatory, olfactory, etc. That's a metadata, the raw data that goes into you. And that comes from the sensory perceptors into your limbic brain, first to the memory hippocampus, and then to the amygdala, which is part of the hypothalamus, where the memory sort of says, hey, this is what it resembles, this particular experience that you've had based on what I have had. And the amygdala says, yeah, this is sadness, this is grief, this is invalidation. And then passes it on as a secondary data to the prefrontal cortex, which then converts it to thoughts, actions, etc., which is tertiary. So you start exploring from the tertiary, you are getting corrupted data. If you want to explore, you have to go into the sensory. What do you sense in your body as you experience something? Now, unless you are taught that, you are never going to get to that state of what you are talking about, because you are being authentic. In terms of saying, I don't know a damn thing about coaching, probably that is the best state to be in. Because when we get people who are new learners, they are able to understand far better about this than people who have already done their level 1 or ACC level from somebody and come there with all fancy ideas about what coaching is, which is not. So, there's a lot of stuff there, and I'm not critical. I'm not at all critical about the ICF framework. I think it serves a purpose, okay? Because there is a certain standard, like in any education, it's a taxonomy. If you know what curriculum development, learning development is. So you can't find fault with the taxonomy. It's a way that the taxonomy is applied that needs to be correct. So if you go into, we'll have a couple of other people to answer, then I'll come into a little bit more explanation about what that sensory awareness that I'm talking about is and why. And then you will understand more about what Girish also is talking about. How do I understand? Not necessarily who am I in a spiritual sense, okay? but exactly what is happening in me. What is my, like team dynamics with multiple people, what is my internal body dynamic? What is happening within me? That you would be able to understand. Okay. Yeah, just hold on for a few minutes. Yeah. A couple of others.
Can I field a couple of questions you have come on the chat? One is a very straightforward one, which says that you had referred to a book when you're talking. This is like Kundalini, the psychology of yoga, right? Am I correct?
Yeah, I mean that book, please, for heaven's sake, if somebody wants to go through it, it's a research book by itself. Okay. If anybody wants to read that and then come back to me with a question, I don't want to answer any questions unless somebody is an expert in that subject. I'll go to it, Amanda. Now,
one more question, Ram.
Yeah.
Let me
Can I answer the people who have raised their hands first, Amanda?
Yeah.
Bhaktiyar and Gunjan, and then we'll go to the chat once. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Ram, for clarifying the distinction between mindfulness and the subtle deeper state, where you reflect, where you, with the client. However, in the trials and tribulations of life, we become so scatterbrained that I think mindfulness perhaps is the first stage to achieve, so that you are with the client and you observe him and you are with him totally. And then from there on, whenever you can, you automatically slide into the deeper state, where the proverbial dance in the moment happens. And I've been coaching for 16, 17 years, and I've only achieved that a couple of times, And later on, I remember that I enjoyed that state, but how to bring it on, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you're expecting, it's like, if somebody is doing the same thing every day, I think Einstein, I don't know who said it, the definition of madness is doing the same thing and expecting different results. I mean, that's exactly what you're talking about. I'm doing the same thing, I'm being mindful, and suddenly one day I will become mind-free. I'm sorry, I'm not being critical of you. I'm just saying that's what it is. So you will never get mind-free by being mindful. Mindful is a kindergarten state. It is important for certain things. But to practice mind-free, you need to learn differently. You need to understand it's a different state. And it doesn't mean that there are many times in the day when I'm mindful. I need to be. I go for a walk in the morning, and I'm in yoga. I need to be mindful of what the instructions are. Or when I'm walking I walk on a lake bed, I have to be extremely careful that I don't stumble on. I've stumbled on a few times and fallen and damaged my elbows and knees. So I need to be mindful. But there are times when I need to be mind-free. And that has nothing to do with my practice of mindfulness. I need to completely disengage and detach myself. So, well, we teach that. I'm planning to run a session sometime from October on this. You're most welcome to join that. So it all depends upon how interested you are. Okay, but these are two very distinct different states.
Right.
And I don't think it is correct to say that I will stay on in a mindful state and by experiencing it, one day suddenly the bulb will go off and I will reach the mind-free state or mindless state. Okay, I'm sorry, that's about as much in this session I can convey to you. It's a limitation of my time at this point in time. Gunjan, yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
I don't have a question per se, but it's more like a, it's acknowledgement to something that you said, and I resonate with that. I'm a PCC level coach. I've been practicing full-time coaching since 5 years, in and out of coaching before that. But through my journey, what I've realized when you said it's never about powerful questioning, it's about powerful listening. And to me, that's been the game changer, because the moment I shifted from questioning to listening, I was able to sense more and meet the client where they are exactly. And then that started to change a lot of things. The sensing change, the presence change, going more deeper into their awareness changed. And when we do that powerful listening, everything it follows through. There's a
Thanks.
connect. There's a
Thanks, Gunjan.
Yeah.
Because I'm sorry if I'm being a little bit abrupt, because I see there are a couple of questions I need to answer, then I want to go on to the next. Nair, if you can just wait, there are 2 or 3 questions on the chat, which I promised Manda. Sonali, look, the point is, again, for me, meditation, all this is a way of life. So for most of the time, I'm able to very quickly go into it. But if you're not, a simple deep breathing exercise, inhale deeply, hold it for a few seconds, exhale slowly, hold it for a few seconds, do that kind of a stuff, breathing meditation, which is what they call a trapeze meditation, or Om chanting. If you're doing it, the Ah, U, Ma, the Ah coming from deep below the navel, the U coming from the middle part, Ma coming from here, coming from here. All that will certainly help if you center that yourself. And there is also a simple thing that you can anchor yourself with a very powerful memory that you have of a very happy state where you felt very much in control. So go into it deep, think about it, place it in your heart, and then put your fingers together, to the fingers, anchor yourself. Anytime you want, very quickly, you can anchor and come back into it. So these are simple states that you can do that. There are a lot of meditation tapes available in Kocharya website. They are free. You can access them. At least at the moment, they are free. Daniel, time is a straight line in the West. It's the past, present, future. These days, the curly means yesterday and today. My question is titled today, irrelevant. I thank you for saying that. I never put that damn thing about it in India. Okay. I just put past, present, and future of coaching, and it got converted for some reason into India. So whether it is relevant or not relevant, that's a different question. Yes, just because the word kal means yesterday and tomorrow, kal means actually tomorrow and yesterday in Hindi. That doesn't mean that we are not in the past. And it's so, India is probably the worst example as far as that is concerned. That verbiage doesn't necessarily relate to our mindset, but we are probably much more elastic in time. So like the famous Oppenheimer quote, now it has become very, very famous. Krishna says, "I am death." He didn't say that. If you go to the Bhagavad Gita, if you know your Bhagavad Gita, he says, "I'm time. And as time, I'm the destroyer." Because as time rolls, everything gets destroyed. It gets created, it sustains, and it gets destroyed. So that's a very, very deep subject. So anyway, I totally appreciate your point. Maybe another occasion where we can talk deeper into it. Yeah, Kajal, somewhere around the 2nd of October, we are starting that session. Just get in touch with support at Kocharya or Kiva, she will tell you. Nair, your question, please. Is there anything else, Manda? If I have missed out, please let me know. Thank you.
No, we are well covered. So thank you, Ram.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Nair.
Yeah,
Nair.
hi there. Can you hear me? I just wanted to say that, I find this fascinating. I've actually had, 35 years in business and teaching. And, this kind of bridging of many different concepts that I've found in your work, coaching versus mentoring. You're talking a lot of internal inner climate, right? And kind of synchronizing or really tuning into that first within yourself to kind of really become that witness. And that's a personal practice of, continual meditation for a longer time. And then being able to really listen or hear in a whole different wavelength. So I wanted to come back. I'm quite interested in also bridging this kind of significant India and US and many other countries. I've traveled over 100 countries and done business there. But I think India and US to me in some levels are two ends of an extreme. So if you could make a quick comment, I know time is short, and also on the coach versus mentoring. My interpretation is in mentor, you're really, growing the mentee, and in coaching, you're moving further into growth and with a performance outcome. So thank you so much.
Yes and no. Look, if you're familiar with the European Mentoring Coaching Council, where I'm also accredited, their viewpoint is very different. They still maintain the word mentoring equivalent to a coach. The only difference that is that in the case of mentoring, there is a certain amount of experiential kind of stuff that comes in terms of, but you still stay away from solutioning. Mentoring, ICF used to define as solutioning. Now, if you see that I completely removed that. Even in the team coaching definitions, the word mentoring has pretty much disappeared, which is, I think, correct, because mentoring has got a bad name, and it's not bad. It is coming from a space where you are using your experience to work with somebody to create their awareness, and so it's perfectly all right. What is not acceptable in coaching or mentoring is providing somebody a solution which is arising out of your DNA based on your experience, which may not be relevant to their DNA and their experience. So that is what is the real difference as far as I can see. But I mean, these are all individual impressions and opinions. I'm not going to change anybody's mind if they don't want to change it. Okay, so let me go into this other space that I talked about. So the question I think a couple of people asked, I think Girish asked and someone else asked as well. One of the things that, and now I see EMCC has actually had a symposium on something called democratization of coaching, which I've been talking about for several years now. To me, democratization of coaching means somewhat differently from what it means to many people. Democratization is that, can each of us practice coaching on our own? Can I help every single person that I meet into a coach, a healer, and a leader, which they deserve to be? And that is what I would call as democratization. So the base of that democratization process, which we are trying to see how much we can simplify it and able to reach many people, including young people starting from 15 to whatever, maybe free of cost and stuff like that. We are working on it. It's an aspirational kind of program which will work while we are still doing our revenue generating programs for ICF credentials and so on. So one of the things that came up there was, why not teach everybody self-coaching? So why not everybody teach the skills of coaching? That means you start with the primary aspects of coaching are really 4 things. Okay, ICF has 8 competencies, but you can easily bring them together into 4. The first one is leaving aside the mindset, the ethics and the coaching mindset, is about intentionality. The intentionality is when you set an agreement, does it have a meaning? Does it have an evidenceable factor? Does it identify the kind of challenge areas, focus areas, etc.? And if you are familiar with it, if you go to Project Aristotle of Google and teamwork, and you find these are the same spaces which are being mentioned there as well. And then you come to the space of psychological safety, trust, presence, and all that kind of a stuff. So your relationship with other person, are you making it an equal space? Not that you coming from a gurudom kind of a position, a teacher, a vertical kind of dissemination, but it's a totally horizontal. If anything, you are sitting lower than the other person. And then it's about communication, where the communication is primarily one of very, very, very deep listening, observing, verbal, not so much the verbal, the non-verbal, what is not being said. What does it hold back? Is it about the limiting beliefs, various other kinds of things that are coming based on that? Is it possible for us to inquire and explore deeper into this? And there we are using a process. We call this the first part as a DEMO process, desire, evidencing, meaningfulness, and obstacles, what is technically called the CC3 in ICF competencies. And the entire communication part of it, anywhere between, let us say, even trust and safety and presence to active listening and evoking awareness, we call it as a LASIE process, listening and observing, acknowledging and appreciation. S is sharing whatever you sense, and inquiry and exploration, using an approach which is called sensations, emotions, and thoughts. And we place sensations first, as I experienced before. So let me focus on that. because that is where I think the future is moving, and I'll come into that part in a short while. We have up to what, 8 o'clock, Mandor? Am I correct?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, as I said earlier, the neuroscience clearly tells us that your sensory perceptions are your first response. So all that you need to do is, when you have a problem, and do it yourself, and you learn and you self-coach yourself. It's so simple that if I am upset about something, let me take a deep breath. Let me close my eyes, plant myself firmly, get into a state where I'm slightly trance kind of position, alpha state as it were, and look within to see where that sensation of that discomfort lies in my body. It may be an argument that I had with somebody invalidated me. It's an anger about something, somebody did something. It's about a sadness. It may be anything, whatever it is. Okay, just do that. It takes some time to get used to. And there are some of them in the group here, Arun and others, who have experienced this and they can vouch for it. It's miraculous. Let's say if I have deep anger, okay, and I'm not giving a diagnostic, but generally, if I have deep anger about something and I see something which boils me over, right? So I decide to sit there quietly, and I used to do this. That's why I'm explaining it, and look within. That anger will lie somewhere in my stomach region. And for those of you who are familiar with chakras, it's a Manipuraka chakra. It is there in that state. If it is deep fear, it lies lower in the Swadhisthana. If it has something to do with relation, love, emotional invalidation, Maslow's third level, it lies here in the heart. And if it's cognitive, the fourth level of Maslow, it lies here. And you can self-diagnose. So just do that. And then just keep watching it. Just the process of watching that sensation will allow that anger to cool down, the frustration to settle, the sadness to go low, things like that. And at some point in time, if it's still causing you discomfort, take a few deep breaths. Those of you who are familiar with Bhastrika, deep inhalation and blowing out, do 3 or 4 times. And better still, just before you start, when you're in a normal state, when you can think of a fantastic experience that you've had, sit quietly with the 2 fingers like this. Think about that state. Expand it in your mind space as a football field, sensory experience, colorful. Go deep into the experience of how good you feel in it. People acknowledging you, saying good things about you are feeling good sensorily and everything. And when you are at the peak of that experience, press it very, very hard. Embed that kinesthetically. Do 3 or 4 times. And when you are in a disturbed situation, when you are reflecting, or even in real life, you're meeting somebody who you know is going to put you off. That person is going to start something, a diatribe, a venting, whatever. You lose energy. Just then, after doing this, put your fingers together politely in your pockets, and you'll find you will be able to face them. It is the simplest way that I have seen that you can get yourself down, up, if you wish, not down, into that energy state. You are feeling the body energy within you, the sensation within you. And you are able to morph it, either by that deep breathing, inhalation, exhalation, or through the anchoring process. Doing that, I have a very simple word for it called reliving is relieving. By reliving it, you are relieving it. And you are healing yourself. I'm a master Reiki healer. And I've been through every single healing process known. The pranic healing, the shamanic healing, and everything. And all of them, the fundamental basis is only this. Can you get down to your sensory level and being able to appreciate it? So if I just would answer any questions on this, it's seemingly very simple. This is something that you can practice yourself. And once you're fairly adept at it, you can start using yourself. Now, if you start practicing yourself every day, keep about 10 minutes a night, even when you're lying in bed before you go to sleep. Can you think about the day, what happened during the day, something that happened that you wish had gone better, that you had done something better, that somebody, not blaming anybody, but blaming yourself, hopefully. And go through this process and you will find an answer to it. And whatever is left there, just leave it to the universe saying, okay, please give me a solution. By next morning, you will wake up with a solution. It's seemingly simple, and cognitively, you can think of 100 reasons why it should not work. It's like a centipede. If it starts thinking about why my legs are moving, it's going to get it caught and it won't move. So stop all that cognitive process and try it. It'll work. I can promise you that. I've taught this to thousands of people and it has worked. And this is not my knowledge to share. It's scriptural knowledge. And it has been proven by neuroscience. So I'll stop here. If there are any questions on this, I'll be happy to answer it. And then I'll go to the last part of it, which is about the future.
Any questions or anything, any items to discuss? Raise your hands or put it on chat. Okay, I don't see anything. Yes, so Ram, let us talk about the future. So how do you see that evolving?
Sure.
Things like
Yeah.
AI, emotional
Yeah.
sensing. What
Sure.
more?
Sandeep, you asked a question about when is the next program. Cindy is running a program sometime, not the next about 4 weeks. Just write to Cindy or support@kocharya.com. You will get the information what you wanted. Okay, now what lies in the future? I've been working for the last couple of years with neuroscientists. And of late, I'm trying to work with AI because the AI broke in all of a sudden last year and everywhere it is over there. And we are trying to work with a couple of academic institutions and trying to get some kind of relation with people in Google and trying to see how we can deploy it. I look at it this way. If somebody is going to do transactional coaching, the way we are doing today, using the skill set, these are the markers. You're setting up yourself for failure in the future because they don't need you. The AI can do it far better. All that it has to ask is each of those questions. Okay, what is it that you want to get out of the session? What is meaningful about it? Or ask 2 or 3 questions. Or the markers are set there beautifully for AI. Okay. So if you really want to make a difference, and that's the same thing with self-coaching. If what we are trying to do catches on, and people are able to do it without credential, who cares? Then you are left with a portion, maybe 20%, where people are in deeper issues, traumas, where they need to go deep into it. And there are many cases like that, very serious cases. Not all of them may be tremendously paying, but soul satisfying. And there's a lot of teamwork that is happening. So here, I would like to make that linkage between self-coaching and then when you are talking about individuals, even with the individuals, introduce the concept of systemic. That means not just about focusing on the mind of the client, about the client himself or herself, but about how they are impacting other people, how they are impacting them, which is a larger systemic approach, like in OD, self, team, and the larger organization. And then from there, what about the larger system? So more and more, we are looking in the space, or we are working in the space of systemic, not individuals. So companies come to me and say, hey, we have about 6 people. I mean, it's happening practically every week now. And I say, why do you want me to do that? Why don't I work with the team, the 6 of them together? Or initially they have some questions, but more and more people are changing. The simple things, again, I would refer you to those of you who are familiar, dysfunctions of a team, Lencioni or Project Aristotle in Google. It's about establishing the psychologically safe space with interdependability and then having very clear goals, which are structured, which have a certain amount of ROI factors and impact values. So if you do that, I find that when you're working with a team, I can guarantee the client three things. One, that there's a much greater clarity in terms of what you're looking for. If it is just individual coaching, most often it's behavioral. Somebody has to be less aggressive or strategic thinking or whatever it is. A lot of it is intangible. No organization, however much people talk about ROI of individual coaching, believe you me, it's total rubbish. I haven't yet come across any single tool which is direct. It's all indirect. It is all hypothetical, one after another. But in team coaching, the organization can set a very clear goal. This is a product that I want to launch within this period. This is a change that I want in terms of revenues or profits in this period. And so that is the meta goal. And then how it can get transferred into behavioral team works out. So there's a very clear ROI factor which is up there where the coach is bound in terms of performance and the team is bound in terms of success. The second is it's much cheaper. Most of us coaches, we charge by the hour. Maybe you charge a little bit more if there are 10 people, but it's not very much more. So if you're coaching 10 people, it's going to be, if not 10%, it's going to be maybe 15% maximum. It's going to be much, much cheaper. So the value for the buck is far more. And the last is, the most important, is that you're building parallelly a team within that organization. Ultimately, anybody who's today a management scientist with some amount of forethought knows that it's the teams that do the work, not those samurai individuals. Okay. Unless they are good team players, they are a disaster. And this has been proven time and again. There are enough number of examples that is available. And the fourth one, if you want to take it, if you do a team coaching properly, it's like a scenario planning because you are bringing in multiple points of view from everyone. You're looking at far into the future. Peter Hawkins says that beautifully. Future back and outside in. You are getting in. And so you have a much greater space. So I see at one level, the individual coaching, self-coaching without the need for a coach, that is going to be very much the norm. Why do people want to unnecessarily pay money to a coach? They can do it mostly themselves. If they really have a serious amount of this thing, then they will go to a coach. But yes, then the coach will have to be able to do sensory work, deeper work, all that kind of a stuff. The second is the systemic work. And when you go deeper into systemic work, and those of you who are familiar, probably Thierry Yu, for example, Otto Scharmer's, which I would advise every one of you, take a look and go, it is free. It becomes spiritual. At the end of the day, coaching is spiritual in the sense, if you define spirituality, that is not about you. It's about the others. And Krishna said in the Bhagavad Gita, true renunciation is not sitting and gazing at your navel. That is stupid. You are here to act. And when you are acting, are you acting selflessly? Are you providing selfless service without worrying about the outcome, which is selfish? If you're able to do that, then the coaching as a process becomes sensory at the individual level, self-coaching. It becomes systemic and it becomes spiritual. And believe you me, this process today, I talked about neuroscientists. There are people who are working on, I know a couple of guys who worked with me. They have developed, they put these sensors on your head. They have already mapped. They've got a complete emotional directory of the brain, and they have related to the voices. They can take any conversation and give a readout for you in terms of what is the core emotion that comes out of that conversation. And it is still at a very nascent level. Just imagine how powerful it is going to be. It is not just semantic interpretation, it is emotional intelligence interpretation. And that's possible today. And people who think AI is screwing up everything, it's going to be a catastrophe, they don't even know what they are talking about. Anything is. A knife in the hands of a butcher, a knife in the hand of a surgeon, a knife in the hand of a murderer, exactly that. So AI, there's no way of rolling back anything. AI is going to be there, and AI is going to get into these areas. And today, those of you who may know this, is what they call microfacial techniques. the camera can analyze minute changes. I'm actually working with a couple of people on this subject. So as you're speaking, they have the camera, a good quality zoom can even do that. They've got the way to analyze this and be able to pick up from there based on the emotions. They're able to process in real time what the heck is going on there and give you the feedback. So to be very honest, they don't need a conversational coach anymore. They need a coach who is going to go beyond that AI. And that's possible. And that is where the energy part of it comes in. I think it's a long way before AI catches up with that. So my simplistic advice to all of you, those of you who are interested, is get into that space where you are looking at things more sensorily, and then, yeah, sure, put the emotions on it, and finally come to the thinking aspect. Yeah, it is important. After you have gone through all that experience, like someone comes to me with a great amount of grief, and I can answer some questions now because I'm more or less through with whatever I want to cover about as a future. We have enough time. They are suffering from deep grief. Now, I don't know if you are following up on discussions on Kubler-Ross's 5-stage model on grief, which is about, deep anger, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. A lot of people call that total nonsense. I don't think it is believed it's nonsense. It makes some sense. But you can't just say that, look, yeah, that is what it follows. It doesn't. Because there are many people for whom grief takes a long time to process. It's not over a period of time they come into acceptance. My own experience was that the reason why that happens is because the grief is intermingled with guilt. They feel guilty. Grief dissolves over time, but guilt does not. Guilt stays there like a rock. I worked with many people, dozens and dozens of people who are suffering from grief, who have been in therapy for years, 20 years, some of them. In 1 hour, less than 1 hour, or 2 sessions of half hour, they've been able to go deep into their body, figure out that it's not just a grief, there is a guilt, and why the guilt, and create an awareness through the sensory exploration that they are not responsible for the guilt. Because the whole definition of guilt is that you are looking at something that happened at a point in time with a certain intelligence that you possess, today with superior intelligence, and having a better than 20/20 vision of how you judge that. So it's a nasty piece of works as far as guilt is concerned, or regret is concerned. They are, whereas fear, anger, and everything has energy about them, guilt and regret and shame have no energy. They are totally negative. And how do you get rid of them? And the sensory awareness process helps you to get out of that. So if you train yourself in these are areas, maybe at some point in time, the distant future, AI will catch up. But for a long time, you would be able to practice much better the coach. Just to, as an aside, there's this guy who died recently, David Peterson. I used to know him a little bit. He was a Google's chief coach. David is a very funny guy. I had been with him sharing a podium once in terms of a speech. Another one, he was at a mastery level conference in Boston with master coaches. He took the mickey out of them. And they got so upset when he said that coaching is going to die, all you guys. And the example he quoted was phenomenal. He said, you know what? Autistic people, and many of you are autistic, you may not know, you are in the spectrum somewhere. They prefer to talk to robots. They don't like to talk to another human being. So you'll find more and more people are preferring to talk to robots and not to humans. Oh my God, I had a bunch of people who were their master coaches. They were giving him, I mean, the worst kind of expressions about him. But what he said was absolutely true. And in his own lifetime, just before he died, you had ChatGPT and things like that coming up, and it's going to gain much more momentum. If you think it's going to go away, it's not going to go away. If you think it's going to go away, you're going to go away. It's not going to go away. So please be careful. Yeah, Kajol, Nair, any questions?
Yeah. So, sir, my understanding from what you said that energy, when you say sensory reading, I think you're talking about energetically reading, right? So, what is that study that helps us energetically read? I'll be honest. So, I'm a pranic healer.
No, what do you mean by study? There's no study.
How do we read energetically? How do we
just go inside our body and watch it?
As in,
watch your body. If you're a pranic healer, if you're not able to do it, then something is wrong with the pranic healing taught to you. But believe you me, I have some problems with pranic healing. I practiced it for a while. The pranic healers are afraid and they have to wash their hands in water. In healing, you shouldn't be afraid because you are not the karta, you are not the doer. So there's no karma attached to you. So why do people wash their hands in water? Ask your guru that. Ask him to ask his guru. And if you're able to sort it out. I'm not criticizing you. I'm just saying that this is something which I found completely unacceptable in pranic healing. But look, any meditation is useless unless you are able to. First sense I teach people is first do a breathing awareness. Okay. When I ask people, are you breathing? Oh, of course I'm breathing. How do you know you're breathing? You tell me, how do you know you're breathing? Any of you?
Okay, I mean, since you asked, so breathing involves inhalation and exhalation.
No, one sentence. How do you know you are breathing? One sentence. 5 words.
We are alive. The fact that we are alive.
No, that is not that's. I mean, there are a lot of people who are alive. They are vegetables. Okay.
Watch the wind going.
Yeah, Arun, you don't say that, please. You know it, so you know the answer. You just have to watch the breath. Is it flowing? Are you feeling on your lips? That is how I know you're breathing. Okay. So practice that first. In Vipassana for 4 days, that's all that you do. Watch your breath. And then you go from the top of your head to the tip of your toes. Stay there till you start feeling something. Do that. Go to the top of your head, stay there with completely silent, ears blocked if you can, maybe zero gravity if you can, if you want to be free of all sensation. And then say, hey, how is it feeling? After some time, you'll start feeling some, it's almost like, pounding there. There could be the blood flowing there. There's some crawling there. There's some sensation. Something will happen. And you come to this point, the chakra point, which is the center of the eyebrows, then the throat, then the heart, the navel, the groin, and then the perineum. These 7 points, just watch them to start with, and then go to the limbs. In Yoga Nidra, there are 108 points that you have to go through in the body. Each one of them, the job is to feel the sensation. And that is the first step towards understanding what is chakra, what is healing. So you cannot heal without knowing it. Unfortunately, we all learn it differently. I'm not being critical, I'm just stating a fact. So learn how to sense your body. If you sit quietly, you will do it. That's all that is needed. Okay. Because I can't make you sense your feelings. There's no way that I can do that. I can only show you how. You can learn from me. I can't teach you. It's like swimming or dancing or whatever it is. Do you know how to breathe? Is it feeling there? Similarly, sense. Is it feeling there? How do you know you are tense? Most people don't even know the difference between tension and relaxation. Just a simple experiment. Just hold your hand out, clench your fist like this. Do that. Please do that. And tighten it as much as you can. Don't hold your breath. Take a deep breath and exhale it and clench it, clench it, clench it, clench it till you feel discomfort. Are you feeling discomfort? Okay, now let it go. Let it go. Let it go. Exhale, exhale. Let it go. Open your fists. Open your fist. You're not opening your fist. Open your fist. You're getting too comfortable with a closed fist. Okay, open your fist. So now what do you feel? That is relaxation. Learn to differentiate between tension and relaxation. Honestly, I didn't know the difference between tension and relaxation. As an executive, I was always tense. So you have to learn the difference between tension and relaxation, how to tense yourself and you relax yourself. These are very, very simple things. Then you start sensing. Naya?
Yes, as a long-time Vipassana meditator, I'm glad you brought that topic up. I just had that thought when you mentioned, you know, the loneliness factor and the uncertainty factor is what I think humans are going to be already showing a lot of need to come into alignment with, right? And my quick question to you was, when you mentioned that in 2 half an hours, you were able to bring that one person that you mentioned into a knowledge of releasing. I was curious to know how that applied in your experience with teams. Do you first do some level of individual touch points or work before you bring them all into a team and just go right at it? That was one question. And the second one was, you mentioned something about being performance. The coach is measured, has their kind of performance measured. And then that again.
No, I mentioned about ROI.
Right. No, but you said that it's beneficial because it's cost effective doing it together as a team. And then,
correct,
the coach will have some kind of measurements to go by. And in there, I'm thinking that what you mean is that if you have brought the team up to a level of intense awareness and consciousness, then the measurement, the performance will by itself rise because, so I think that's kind of an intuitive question. I just
that intuition doesn't work. See, that's all fine, but the intuition has to be measured. Okay. Despite all my spirituality, I'm a scientist at heart, so I need to see the metrics. Whereas in a team, you can work towards an endpoint and you can measure that. Okay. Whereas in individual coaching, if you say that, look, you as an individual, even if the person is a CEO, he's dependent on a team, and if you set a target for a particular change in revenues or whatever it is, it's not just that one person's job, but it's multiple people's job. Whereas in a team, it's much easier. That's what I meant by ROI can be measured. People's job. And that's a fact, okay? And what was the other point that you raised? I don't know, what was it about?
Loneliness and uncertainty.
Yeah, loneliness, I'll come to in a minute. But team, yes, please go through. There is a blog on Cocharia website called SPEED Process, SPEED. Sharing strengths, P for producing a co-created vision, E for exploring options, E for establishing a structure, and D for determining accountability. So it describes the process of how we go about it. And the first thing is you try to bond them emotionally by sharing personal experiences. So it's a very much art, it's not a science. So in that process, you bring in certain amount of sensory awareness. But truly speaking, in team, it cannot be done to the same level as you can do with an individual. So if you really want to do sensory work, you will have to take them up separately and you have to do with that. Coming to loneliness, I don't know, there's a video that's available on Cocharia YouTube. It's with Dr. Varun Soni. He's a Dean Provost at University of Southern California. He's a friend of my son, Pranav. They had a conversation. I was there for a while, where he talked about that he has a flock of about 60,000 people in USA and outside another 50,000 people. And the biggest problem is, which today Vivek Murthy is talking about, Surgeon General, as loneliness is an epidemic. He said, for 5 years, I've been talking about this because I saw this coming. And he said, in my days, which was about maybe 20 years ago when he was 25 something, they were really worried about, okay, how can I be happy? And how can I set goals with a purpose and all that stuff? But today he said, what the kids are asking is, why do I need to live? How do I make friends? So, and they are living in dormitories with multiple people around them, but they are still lonely. So where does the loneliness come from? His opinion is that it's because they no longer have faith in their family. They have no longer faith in their religion. They have faith in nothing. They don't have faith in the government. So they don't know who the hell to trust. So essentially, the loneliness arises from the fact that they can't trust anybody, they can't believe in anybody. And they say it is like, I don't know, I mean, this is another deep subject. Maslow's, a lot of people criticize Maslow without even knowing anything about Maslow or knowing things about it which are not relevant. Maslow talks about 5 levels. Many of you may know: survival, safety, emotional, cognitive, and then self-actualization. Most of us, when we are born, we already fulfill the first 3. We are knocking on the emotional, cognitive validation. We want to prove my dad is bigger than yours. I have a bigger house than yours. I have a bigger car than yours. Because you're already survival, safety, and emotional, these things are generally taken care of. So when that cognitive validation doesn't happen, because it's no longer guaranteed by the near and dear, the caregivers, it's about peers, including, as you grow up, social media, likes and dislikes. Then a few hits on you, on your head, cognitively, that brings you down to the 3rd level, that I am emotionally now invalidated. And when that happens sufficiently strongly, nobody likes me. I can't trust anybody. And then you come down to the 2nd level. You start worrying about your safety. And then it happens seriously there, and it affects your safety. Then you go down to your survival issue. Then you become suicidal. So Varun was saying that literally 10% of the student population is suffering from suicidal tendencies. And he found that therapy is not helping, counseling is not helping. He thinks that coaching can help. So we are trying to do something with him on that program. In India, I'm talking to a few academic institutions who are finding something similar happening. Bangalore, where I live, is a suicidal capital of India. So there are issues happening every day. So loneliness is huge, but the question is, with adults, loneliness is caused by different factors. With young people, your loneliness is caused by different factors. So we need to understand what those factors are. So some of the things we are trying to do now is to work with student populations and be able to see if there's something that we can understand more about why they feel that way. Somebody was asking about, very detailed kind of Sandeep about body cannot, this separation of the body and the mind is, to my mind, very foolish. It's one entity. In the Vedic scriptures, there's no separation between the body and the mind. It just says mind, whether in yoga or any other forms of Upanishads, etc. And that mind includes the body. It says the body mind as one entity has these 4 dimensions, which were talked about 5,000 years ago, and they were found by neuroscience only less than 100 years ago, not even post-Jung Freud. The first is senses. They are called the manas. Then it goes to the memory, which is chitti. Then it goes to ahankara, the ego, or the persona, which is the limbic brain, emotions. And finally, buddhi, which is a higher intelligence. These are the 4 parts. And today, neuroscience fully accepts. And you have to read people like Candace Pert, who's written about molecules of emotion, biology of belief by Bruce Lipton, who's a molecular biologist. And they explain to you why the body and mind are not separate. They are one. So the body can perceive what the mind can perceive what the body can. But the brain is not the mind. The whole body, you have 10 billion cells here. Someone of my size may have 100 trillion cells. The 100 trillion cells, each cell has intelligence, mitochondria. And that intelligence is as good as anything in the brain. So here you have 10 billion, you have 100 trillion all over. You can see the fraction. Do we use the entirety of that 100 trillion? We don't. That's a whole problem. We don't even use the entirety of the 10 billion. That's a problem. How do we use it? Not by separation, by integration. And today, neuroscience talks about what is called polyvagal nerve. Earlier, they talked about one vagus nerve which was going through. Now they know it's exactly the way that the chakra system describes, Ida and Pingala, which go around the spinal column, intertwining at different points. The one which originates in the center and moves to the right goes to the left side of the brain, and the one which is on the left side goes to the right side of the brain. Mm-hmm. And the left side of the brain, the left side one which goes to the right side, controls your autonomic nervous system in terms of keeping you calm, this thing, and the other one in case you get into any danger, which goes to the right side of the brain. And today, this is where neuroscience and scriptural science interact. So there's a lot out there. We need to understand more about them. And then a lot of fluff out there as well. So to separate that, the only way to do that is experience for yourself. And that's what I have done for the last 25 years. Every single thing I'm telling you now is something that I have experienced. I'm not quoting from somebody's text. And when I was first tested for my brainwave patterns, and I was meditating, and people at that time I was doing Reiki meditation, people said, "You're not meditating because the needle is going over 20 hertz. At that time, they could only measure up to 20 hertz, which was beta. 10 years later, in 1995, Herbert Benson discovered the gamma waves, which went up to 40. Then when I measured it again, mine was at 40. So there's a lot that neuroscience didn't understand 20 years ago, which started getting understood. So there's a phenomenal amount of today AI. I mean, it's unimaginable what is happening today. So keep your mind, that's what Otto Scharmer keeps saying, from a closed mind, closed heart, closed will, move to open mind, open heart, open will. We all think we know. We don't know a damn. And we need to have the vulnerability to accept that we don't know. That's where the problem is. Okay, I'll stop here.
Ram, I think we are at the top of the hour. So
absolutely.
Yeah, and maybe we can let people ask you questions later in case you still have time. But any last minute final words for this team before we close this session?
No, not from me. I ended only with questions. I'm quite happy to stay on for another 10 minutes. I don't have a problem. It depends upon your administrative issues. But if there's anybody else who has any questions, thank you very much for being here and listen to the load of nonsense that I talked about. So if there are any questions, you can post me directly, give me the feedback. Oh, it was unacceptable it was, or acceptable it was, or whatever it is. Absolutely. So I'm quite okay with either. But share, talk about it, experience it yourself, and see for yourself what's happening. Yeah.
Ram, personally, I think it was an insightful session. You know, I was going through a masterclass on applied psychology, neuroscience, Eastern philosophy, everything packaged together in 1.5 hours. So thanks for that.
Yeah, and there was too much of it in one class. Anyway, okay. Yeah.
It was a wonderful.
If there are any specific questions, feel free. Otherwise, yeah. Mail at support@Kocharya. I won't be able to handle individual mails, but they will send me all the mails to me. And if you have any questions, I'll be more than delighted to answer any of your questions. And thank you very much for being here. Take care, all of you. Bye.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much. And
have a good
thanks,
time.
Anand. Yeah. Thanks, Arvind, for being there. Bye.
Thank you, Ram.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys.